Hey, welcome to the Doc Analyzes Anything, the show where science and psychology meet, and we analyze behavior, any behavior, including breathing normally, completely through your nose, but while your mouth is wide open. So let's all try it. Yeah, that is odd.
It's not. It's actually harder to do than I expected.
I think the wide open is the kicker there, because I
Yeah.
probably do breathe through. I never think about this.
So I broken my nose so many times that I had to actually have it fixed. They said it's like a crushed up pop can in there. And Chad broke it the first time, so don't shake your head at me, Chad.
I was visualizing the crushed up pop can, and that sounds
Yeah. And even
Oh
still,
man,
it's easier to breathe through my mouth a lot of the time. So,
you broke Steve's nose?
yeah.
kids. Yeah, we're playing street hockey.
I was
Man, with a
even though
stick
he's like
or a puck?
no, so you have to picture this. Even though Chad's like almost 3 years older than me, I was still taller than him. So I'm standing up behind him, and he had the butt of the stick, and he like went to pull the ball back, this hockey ball, and the butt of the stick went right up my nose.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's awful.
but at least I got a dig in about Chad being short. So there's that.
While we were children. Yeah,
Yes.
I don't think that you're short, even while you were a child, Chad.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. I guess. Hello, everyone. I'm your
Alright, I
host,
guess.
Dr. Steven Sparks, along with my just about every time co-host Kyle Sturry, and every once in a while when he feels like getting up and embracing the day, co-host Chad Hartung over here.
The co-host who just now realized that he has a soundboard completely at his disposal in this. So
Yeah, Eddie's sound effects is just Kyle going rogue. We have no plan on using this, just so everyone knows.
I'm very excited.
So before we get started here and talking about science in general and why you should all believe it or not be dummies, we're gonna first give a shout out. We all just got back from Tampa Bay Beer Week, where we were either embraced or tolerated by everyone down there. Great time. Like, I'm wearing my Arcane Brewing hat here. You'll see the Angry Chair shirt, which they really, helped us out, allowed us to record while we're down there, which will be coming out here shortly. Put up one of our branded mugs right next to a giant gator head and a tiny mini Jesus up on behind the bar.
It was very
And
Florida.
allowed us to pass out all kinds of goodies to everyone. So that was cool. Hidden Springs, they hooked us up, let us put a sticker on the cooler, which was fun. So lots of jumping around, tasting beer, hanging out with good people down there. It was a lot of fun.
I had a great time.
And
The flight back not so much, but had a great time.
Well, that is what you get for refusing to get the face tattoo. That's all I have to say.
Did you had a rough flight?
There were wind advisories in Indiana, up to 70-mile-an-hour winds. I saw 3 people throwing up on the way in, on the descent. That was awful.
It sounded like you were almost one of them.
No, I was good. The kid in front of me was yelling, "There's no barf bag! There's no barf bag!" And he was like looking frantically for a bag. So the stewardess was like following around trying to find it. It was like a roller coaster. It was very, very surreal. I'd never had one that bad. Not nervous. Like, I was pretty okay, and I don't get too sick on those. I had a headache when it was done. But the girl beside me was like, if he throws up, I'm gonna throw up, and I also don't have a barf bag. So I found my barf bag, and I was stuck. Do I give it to this kid, or do I give it to the girl beside me after he throws up?
Well, what a dilemma!
Yeah,
What
the
would you have
prisoner's
done?
dilemma. So I gave it to the girl beside me, and
Mhm.
then I picked up my bag that was under his seat, because if he threw up, it would have rolled back onto my bag. So I just got ready to lift up and let it go underneath me while she had a bag to go in.
Yeah, in that moment, they're both throwing up regardless. So self-preservation, you give her the barf bag 100%.
Yeah. This what I don't know what we were going to talk about, but we should talk about this the whole time.
Yeah, our ride was a little rough, but not bad. There's
I
a
feel like
couple
I
times.
feel like there's a good couple opportunities for some soundboard action there, but
Yeah, just totally,
Uh,
you
totally.
win some, you
Is
lose
there
some.
like a scream as the plane goes down type of sound effect, or
I don't have a scream.
So many options.
I will
I've got
say
a I've got laughing.
my yeah, my entire history of like flights as an adult, anyways. My thought is actually kind of mirrored the end of these episodes. Where like, hey, if it's going down, it's gonna be the wildest ride of my life, so might as well enjoy it.
I like that.
But now that I have kids, I don't have quite the same thought of it as I did at that point. So, well,
Would would be a wild ride.
yeah, things change. I I've been in some wild turbulence and everybody's screaming and I'm putting my arms in the air like woo. They love that. The people around you love. Uh,
Uh,
Actually, for some people it did make them laugh and help, and for others it was probably more traumatizing. And so, again, it's like the barf bag. Do I help some people and harm others, or do I do nothing and just let it all happen?
along for the ride, man. I don't know. I don't love puke. I don't love it. It was not going to be fun. He held his own, actually. I
Yeah.
actually talked to him when I was done. He's like, "I was real sorry about that. I embarrassed myself and made everybody real nervous." It's like, "Dude, I'm glad you announced it." Like, I wouldn't
Yeah.
have said anything because
No,
I'd be
I
too
would have hit it.
embarrassed.
I would have opened the seat in front of me, right in the pocket, shut it,
And
acted like nothing happened.
nothing happened here.
All right. So the topic kind of really just generally is what is science? What is science not? Always hear people arguing over like, oh, that doesn't make sense, but it's a scientific fact. So what does that really mean? You know what I mean? Like, let's start with a definition, then we'll get into kind of that discussion of can you wholly trust the scientific method and what's the alternative, that sort of thing. So,
I like
um,
this.
Merriam-Webster defined science as knowledge or a system of knowledge covering general truths or operation of general laws, especially as obtained through and tested through scientific method. And then added systematized knowledge as an object of study. Um, I'm already noticing how tired I am from not sleeping well last night. So we'll just power through this.
Power through, man.
Yeah. So science really is the study, an ongoing study of things rather than knowledge or a knowledge base. We come up with these theories, these laws of science, but it's not just figuring it out and then treating it as fact for the rest of time. It is, okay, based on our understanding, our technology, what we have around us, this is the most accurate, most parsimonious, clearest, makes the most sense out of all the other theories out there. And so that is what it makes most sense to believe for now until more science happens and another theory replaces it.
And I think this is the biggest argument that people who are like anti-science have against it is this not grasping this concept of we are interacting with what we know, but looking to add to what we know by testing those theories all the time.
Yeah, we'll get let's just throw out the moral of the story here. We want you to get away from this, if
Yeah.
anything, from this episode right up front. The biggest takeaway should be that ongoing scientific exploration and improving technology, like much of our current scientific knowledge, might be improved upon or just completely disproven in the future. But that doesn't mean it's not good science. Means really that it was conducted well because it was able to be disproven systematically, and that we've just learned more based on like compared to what we knew before. So there's that, or the alternative of just believing some made up BS that you have no reason to believe in the first place. It's not based on anything. Just someone said, "Hey, those things seem similar. Let's go with that." Those are your options. Science or BS. And so the takeaway is please believe in something, but then be open to changing that knowledge when um, faced with new data, rather than just believing some random shit you hear on the internet. That's kind of the gist.
So where does faith come into play? Because you said science or BS, but you can probably have faith, and not to go religious, I'm just saying faith in general, where you have a belief system, but it's not proven by science, but also it's something that's strong to you.
Yeah, we talked about it in one of the very first episodes. We're not going to get into religion in this uh, podcast directly in terms of what people believe and whether they should or should not. We may analyze, and we probably will, religious behavior, why it was shaped, how it came about over generations and different situations, because I think that's scientifically interesting. But faith itself relies on believing in something that you just have to believe, that there may not be enough evidence to believe. And so sometimes it's having knowledge, but not knowing what that knowledge base is or where it came from. That we talked about the episode that came out this week, those gut feelings or that instinct. And usually that's based on some learning history, and it may not be accurate compared to scientific knowledge, but it's not usually just taken out of nowhere. And so if you don't have a good answer, going with that gut feeling, going with that belief is acceptable because it usually is based in some sort of reality. But when it comes to objective knowledge about the world around us or outside the world around us, the scientific knowledge is the only thing that really can lead us to anything that's not just based on BS. And so to answer your question, faith depends on if you're talking the belief of many people, like in a religious type setting where it relies 100% on this idea that you just have to believe, regardless of what all other evidence is pointing you towards, then that's almost the opposite or completely outside the realm of what is scientifically studyable. Versus, I just have this belief that this is how something works because I have some level of knowledge, but I don't remember where it came from. So, depends on where your definition is there.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think part of the reason, and I don't know where this came from originally, and it may just be in politics, but this idea that scientists changing their ideas or the theories is kind of along the same lines of flip flopping. If you are
Mhm.
both remember or old enough to remember, I believe it was the John Kerry versus George W. Bush, where it was Kerry was holding his own, all of a sudden said, "Oh, he changed his mind on this topic. He's a flip flopper," and then everybody's like, "Oh no, not the flip flopper."
Yeah.
And like, but why is that a bad thing? If you've been presented with new knowledge, and not to say that whatever he was agreeing with was a good thing. I have no idea what the topics were. I just
Mhm.
remember that being the thing they put out there. But if you're presented with new good information that makes more sense than the other information you have, it's more parsimonious. Do you remember what that means, Chad? Were you there for those episodes?
Oh, yes. No, I don't even know if I said it, regurgitated it back properly.
It is basically
He
the
did.
idea. What you say he
Nothing.
did?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he
Go
said
ahead.
it correctly. It's the idea that it there's no additional or unnecessary convoluted parts of the theory. It's the simplest one that makes the most sense based on the knowledge and information we have. And so when you see like conspiracy theorists and they're like, "Oh, but 12 plus 7 equal," and like they go down this rabbit hole, that's the exact opposite of parsimony. They are trying to extrapolate information that may or may not have any sense, but there's no reason to think it does, and there's not enough evidence to support it.
Those conspiracy they're always so funny to me that, like, there's a big shadow government conspiracy, but they've hidden
Yeah.
the answers in these numbers that correspond to letters and, like, why would they leave a trail
Yeah,
that
like, this has worked for this long, but we're gonna give you the hint. It's like the killer movies or the mysteries. We're like, "Oh, we're gonna leave you breadcrumbs." Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
not
That's
usually. It's usually
that's not
sloppiness, if anything.
yeah, yeah.
But also, all these conspiracies, and they think like the NBA or the NFL can't have a trade without it leaking ahead of time. Yet these people are able to just keep these secrets to themselves. There's nobody in government today that I would trust to ever keep anything a secret
Right,
whatsoever.
right.
Um, so yeah, mentioned real quick that all good science should be disprovable, and that doesn't mean it will be disproven, but it needs to be conducted systematically enough and specifically enough that when replicated or applied to a new situation, that it can be shown to not be true anymore. And so this always takes me back. I'm sure I've said it on probably multiple other episodes, but my favorite saying, if you will, going back to Socrates, is the only true knowledge is to know you know nothing. It's like everything we know today could be disproven at some point. As soon as we have some better technology, or I mean, going back to before the knowledge of uh, atoms, like the atomic level of things around us, without an electron microscope, maybe you could, like, guess that something like that was occurring. But that technology allowed us to see what was actually happening and replaced, previous theories. And so much of what we know now, it may just be further exploration and advancement of the same theory, or it might be a completely different theory. But really, we don't know anything except what is available to us to know at this moment.
I'm
And
excited to see what technology arises that makes us think about gravity slightly differently.
and I was saving some of these to the end, but I came up with a lot of examples of things that, you know, have been were accepted scientifically for a long time and then were later disproven. And that's probably the biggest example, is that the laws of gravity, the early Newtonian gravity works for everyday life on Earth, but fails in extreme conditions like black holes or cosmic distances. Um, and can't explain Mercury's orbit, according to one article I read. Then Einstein comes in with the theory of general relativity, and it corrected it by describing gravity as curved space-time, but then it's not compatible with quantum mechanics, and there's uncertainty about its strength with, like, at larger scales. And so that's why they've now had to come up with, dark matter and string theory and all these things to explain, based on our current knowledge of gravity, how that would work. They're just theories that, hey, this could fit, this could be an explanation, but there's no way to know why our current the way gravity works on Earth isn't consistent through all space-time at this point, uh, until we have better technology to understand it. So the
String
theory of
theory.
gravity is, like, wrong, basically.
String theory, and I have to go back and watch Big Bang again.
Yeah. I haven't heard anything about string theory in a while. I think everybody's kind of going the dark matter route at this point, but I'm
Mm,
not sure.
I've never ventured down those roads. I hear those words and I know they mean things.
I read and listened to some of Stephen Hawking's works for a while, and
Really?
what it taught me, one, is it's interesting, it's cool, but what am I going to do with this? But two, that it really just gave me the idea to do this type of show and write books about our science in a way that, if you are interested in science, you can learn more about it.
Yeah.
Because he did it in a way that I understood, but I still, don't have the background knowledge to really know what's going
Yeah.
on. And
Right.
so that's kind of where some of this came from, was reading those books and saying that's cool that I can at least find it somewhat accessible. I don't know, I may have mentioned it before. I was taking a class on theoretical behavior analysis while working on my doctorate, and it was an online course, people from all over the country. And so I had one friend in this class, and I didn't know any of the other people. And the professor says, "All right, why are you taking this class?" And everybody's like, "Oh, I want to, like, really reinforce my foundational knowledge. I really want to understand more about this." I'm like, "Because this is the fun stuff, man. Like, going out there, it's like, going out on limbs, trying to figure out in theory how this all works. It's fun to think about." He's like, "Yes." And everybody else was so frustrated that that was the correct answer.
You got an A.
Yeah. But I also asked him, as we're doing this, we're looking at this. There is no endpoint in science. You know what I mean? I'm trying to remember. I think it might have been Futurama. We're like, oh, that's it. We've learned everything there is to learn, and then everybody just gets real depressed because there's nothing to
Yeah.
do anymore. Uh, I'm like, what is the endpoint of scientific exploration? Like, it doesn't even make sense. It's not a logical question in the realm of science, because it is just studying things to try to understand them better, and then finding something new and going down the rabbit hole, much like Skinner did with his developing
Yeah.
our science, where he was studying Pavlovian stimulus response relations. So think Pavlov's dog, like, hear the bell, salivate. There's the stimulus causes or elicits the response. And he noticed things where, like, okay, these outcomes seem to be affecting the behavior too. This is a completely new thing, like realm of science. And luckily for us, nobody was really paying attention to what he was doing in the lab as a student. Supposedly, one professor thought the other was watching him, and vice versa. And he went on, down this rabbit hole in the early 1930s and developed a true science. And I say true science because it wasn't, all right, I'm going to come up with a theory and then try to prove it, which is science, but you often find people finding reasons to prove their theory rather than just following the science where it takes them. Versus he's like, this is interesting. Let's test this. Now let's test this. And came up with our major, background,
Yeah.
basic principles of our science just by using animals in a laboratory setting and seeing what changing the conditions would do.
Was it Francis Bacon that uh there's a I'm gonna mess these up. There's deductive and inductive reasoning. One is starting with the particulars and coming up with truth. The other is starting with the theory and then trying to get down to the particulars based on big truth. I forget the difference between the two. Do
I'm
you?
trying.
Do you know?
I'm trying to remember. I believe uh, deductive is where you have two and you're trying to come to a concise, theory that uses the two of them, and inductive is where you're branching out into a new one. Similarly, Skinner talked about inductive and deductive contingencies where uh, I believe the inductive would lead to other similar behavior, whereas deductive was reduced from one like multiple stimulus down to a single behavior, if that
Oh
makes
yeah.
sense. I
Yep.
believe I'm doing that correctly.
Yeah.
You put
Bacon was all I think you're right. Bacon was I'm looking it up, I'm fact checking, but
thank you.
inductive reasoning, more complex than making generalizations from observations. So he starts with method begins by making careful systematic observations necessary to produce quality facts and using that ability to generalize from a set of facts to more.
Yeah, and it's kind of what sets us a little bit apart. I don't want to trash all of psychology because although I know most psychologists don't consider us psychologists, and I don't know that I do either. I often say that we're probably closer to physicists than we are to psychologists. It's just the physics of human behavior. But you have like Freud who just was making observations and said, I bet these things called the id and the ego are causing them. And there was no evidence of anything inside us that is the id or the ego. He was just making those things up. Or the
Starting with the
cognitivist,
big picture and
yeah.
then yeah.
Or the cognitivist thing, like, we know the brain plays a large role, which it does, and we know that too. Like every time you learn something, a new neurological synaptic connections being made, or several usually are in different parts of the brain. So they've developed a theory around the brain, knowing that rather than where we study the behavior and now still need to go back and figure out how that interacts with the brain and how that all works.
Mm.
So I've always found it really interesting, and I probably mentioned this before too, how the extinction curve was developed, and then we'll move on. Chad, have I mentioned this to you before? I'm sure I
Yeah.
have, and you. So yeah, this is a test for you.
You have, but not in the same context you're about to, because
Okay,
I kind of know where you're going with it, but delivered differently.
just how he set up an experiment. He was testing different schedules of reinforcement. So the way it is delivered based on fixed time intervals, average time intervals, or different rates, you'll see different patterns of behavior. So he's testing them. He sets up the machine to go all night long until either the rat or the pigeon, I think back then it was usually pigeons, either was satiated or had enough of the food or water, or was tired and was going to take a nap. And the machine broke after he left the lab for the night. And he came back and found this perfect curvature of, all right, I started pressing the lever, pecking the key more often, and then it dies off like quite abruptly. as it becomes salient to the organism, all right, reinforcement's not coming. And then after a little while, spontaneous recovery, it starts pecking again, then accelerates really fast again, and then dies off again. And he sees this pattern where it makes sense that our behavior gets worse before it gets better, at least in terms of problematic behavior that we see, because this has been working for me. I've been obtaining reinforcement. I'm going to accelerate that to try to get this reinforcement that hasn't come yet because it seems weird it isn't here yet. Okay, this isn't working and it dies off. And of course, this is all done without having that verbal behavior going on. But
Yeah.
it's interesting that that was something we may never have learned had the machine not broken when he left the lab one night, you know?
Yeah. You see that so often, even in just like little things, like somebody trying to get a soda out of a soda machine, it gets jammed, and they start hitting the button more and more, and then pounding on it, and uh, yeah, responding increases really quick before it stops.
Yet it's also interesting that he started all of this in the early 1930s while at Harvard. And it was 1959 before we had the first applied behavior analytics study. We're talking close to 30 years of just scientific exploration in the laboratory before we even see how is this working with people. Now, there's plenty of books and theories already written by that point about how it applies to people. And there had been some like laboratory studies with humans as well, but it had never been, okay, these people have this problem. How can we apply it to the real world for almost 30 years? Whereas most other, you know, areas of psychology, it's like, all right, we're going to help this person. Oh, yeah, this seems to help them. Let's study why this helps them. That sort of thing.
Should you mentioned earlier that good science should be, something, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing. I could have it totally
Disprovable.
wrong. Yes. So is that only when it interacts with humans, or is that also for things that are outside of humans' interaction
It,
or en- engagement?
it's a good question. It depends on how you're studying it. I mean, if you were just making scientific observations, recording that, and then trying to come up with a theory based on what you're seeing, then it's hard to be disprovable because you're not actually testing something. You are just studying it the way it is in its natural environment. But then you have, say physics, where Einstein wasn't just, watching the cosmos and like, you know what, I think those are waves out there. He was working with other mathematicians, coming up with theorems and testing it mathematically. And so now we can go back, run those theorems again, test it against the knowledge we've gained since then with more technology and say, this one was right on, but this isn't. And so in that form, it is disprovable because he did so in a way that it can be replicated and either be shown to be correct or not correct as we gain more information. But if you're just talking about looking at the stars, and not to say that it's not scientific exploration as well, if you're making objective observations and collecting that data, you're not really testing it and being able to disprove it the same way, other than saying, okay, now we've made these other observations and those ones may have been wrong. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, enough.
All right. I I I was kind of guessing what your question really was there, but I thought that kind of
Yeah,
fit.
no, that was pretty sufficient because we've gone across a couple of different topics, but like what comes to mind is like you're talking about your pigeon overnight, and then we've talked about gravity, and we've talked about various different things. And yes, humans are the ones that are doing the studying. Um, but is there such thing as doing science that maybe doesn't directly impact humans and then just be able to say, just chalk it up, it's done. It doesn't need to be disprovable because it just is what it is and it doesn't affect Stephen differently than it does Chad.
I think the difference there would be that is it not of enough interest to continue to study it as we got it more information? Not that it's not studyable. I mean, if you're like, this is a perfectly good answer, we don't need to look into it anymore. It's not really a field of study at that point. It's just some, scientific fact that we find interesting that we regurgitate here and there and just kind of leave it be. But if someone decides they're really interested in it and that becomes their life work, then it still would likely be disprovable in the future if it was, conducted well. And let's get into that a little bit too, talking about subjective and objective. And what do we mean by objective measures of science and that sort of thing? Because people throw those words around a lot, and I don't always think that they know what they're saying or talking about.
Hmm.
So, first, the definition: subjective just means something is based on or influenced by personal feelings, tastes, or opinions. So, I think this is how it is. That's kind of what you were talking about before with that, you know, and that's not to say a gut feeling, again, isn't based on objective data you've learned before. But in that moment, it's still a gut feeling because you don't have that data in front of you to base your decision on. Uh, or a lot of times it can be not based on anything because you're remembering things incorrectly, or you've kind of generalized to something that is not based in science anymore. Objective is just the opposite. It's not influenced by personal feelings or opinions in considering or representing facts. It is just looking at the data in front of you, and maybe your interpretation doesn't fit another person's interpretation, but the facts, that data in front of you, are objective. They have been collected. They are what they are. Um, so think of it in terms of, we're working with a family. They're like, listen, I yell at my kid all the time. I'm punishing him, and punishment doesn't work. And subjectively, they think they're punishing them. The feeling is, this is what you do to punish someone, and this is punishing them. But as behavior analysts, I know I've mentioned it before. We're going to come back and say, uh, punishment is anything that follows a response that decreases the future frequency of that response. And so, if you're yelling at that child and they're doing the behavior more often, you're actually objectively reinforcing it if we collect the data and it shows that it is truly increasing at that point. And so there's that feeling of the people like, no, I'm doing one thing or this is what's happening, versus we've collected the data and it shows us right here that what you're doing is actually having the opposite effect.
It becomes objective once you've collected the data, but it's still subjective if you're just voicing your opinion based on your vast knowledge, but not data collected, correct?
Yeah, and a lot, that's where some people have some issues. I think they believe they know what the data are. They don't have it in front of them. They're not actually objectively defining things and discussing them in a way that is verifiable. They're not sharing that data that those decisions or those statements are made based on. And so, if you have the data and you know the data, it's like memorizing the dates in history class in high school. You know what I mean? That is objective information that this happened on this date and this year. Versus, I could talk about the same instance and give you like a ballpark. Like, it happened around this time. Mine isn't necessarily subjective because it's still based on that data, but it's much more subjective than you're actually giving the date, time, place, all that. And so there is some gray area in here. It's almost like a continuum, because if we're sitting there, and especially in our field, you can't, it's not like mathematics where 2 plus 2 equals 4, and you have that, and that is objective data that almost everybody will agree upon, unless you're talking to a theoretical mathematician, and they're like, nope, there's actually no real answer. And I'm like, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Talked to friends like that before, and I'm like, you're losing me so quickly that I can't even argue with you here. But 2 plus 2 has to equal 4. Come on.
It's also in their title, theoretical, so it's still not
Right.
fact.
Yes, but again, theory of gravity has a lot of objective data supporting it. We just know that there are holes there that eventually it'll be replaced or refined in a way that makes more sense, but it's still the most parsimonious explanation for why we're not floating off this planet right now. You know what I mean? Uh, I have to assume that there is a data-driven reason for them to believe that 2 plus 2 isn't always 4, but it doesn't make any sense to me, so I'm just gonna assume that it is always 4. You know what I mean? Um, Here we're talking about defining the behavior. So we're talking about punching someone. It is closing the fist in a way, like with the thumb tucked over the knuckles. Fist is made, arm is cocked back, and then punch is flying with enough velocity to, at least in theory, or potentially injure a person. And then you can even measure the amount of force that you're talking about if you're really trying to get super objective with what a punch is, which in a scientific study might be important, but for our purposes working, it's like, yeah, no, you just hit somebody, you know what I mean? That's fine. Um, but if you don't take the time to objectively define it that specifically, then you may not have agreement between multiple observers that that was a punch that was thrown. And so there's some subjectivity there until you define it well enough. And then once you define it well enough that all parties, any observer that knows your definition would agree upon it, now you can say, I've reached an objective definition of what this is. And now we can collect data based on this objective measure and actually say, yes, this is what has occurred. And so there's different levels of subjectivity in objectivity depending on how well it's defined and how well it's measured is what I'm really getting at. Um, and part of the issue with our science, why it needs to be that way, is I've talked about before with the motivating operations versus discriminative stimuli. So one is the effect of the environment that will make a certain outcome reinforcing and make the behavior more likely to occur. The other is whether something in the environment is present that signals that reinforcement is available. They sound very similar, but we don't at this point have the ability to measure those other than giving an arbitrary score to them. And so if we're trying to say, how often does this behavior occur? How many times in the last hour has this behavior occurred? At what force did this occur? We can use like a force plate to measure how hard they were punched or something along those lines. Those are all objective measures, but to compare them at their lowest basis, it's not like we're talking in physics where you can just do the math and figure it out with actually having to test it. So there are going to be different levels in this. And that's why we have to find ways to objectively define and measure things in a way that is so concise that there won't be disagreement from one person to another.
The idea too of subjective data being treated as objective data. So, in again, not slamming on social sciences, but a lot of the studies and even like treatment effectiveness measures of their interventions are done by uh, interview questionnaires, things like that, versus observable, measurable outcomes. How are you feeling after being on this medication for so long? Or, we've been in therapy for 2 weeks. How was your week this week? Good or bad? Likert scales, those types of things. Um, and using that data, it's just different than natural science.
Well, and that's a good point. We were talking to some colleagues a couple weeks ago, and on our other podcast, it's the real sciencey one that many of these readers may or may not find interesting because we use all the jargon. But they were talking about in their work, and like for say depression, you have the Likert scale, and that's kind of how traditionally in psychology someone determines how depressed a person is like rated on 1 to 5, 1 to 10, based on all these different questions. And they're going in, they're saying, all right, we just want you to, use a golf clicker or on a piece of paper on your phone, record in this 5-minute period of time, do you feel depressed or not? And now we're going to go back and see the amount of time you report being depressed versus the time you don't report being depressed. Is it decreasing like we'd hope it to be while doing these interventions? And
Mm-hmm.
I was appalled that I had never thought of that. It's so much more clear, so much more objective. It's still subjective to the person to think like, am I feeling, anxiety right now or not? And is it enough to report it versus like, oh, it's a 1 versus a 5 based on these situations. But at least now we can say yes or no, it is occurring in this moment. And our goal is for someone to feel anxious less often than, putting it on a scale, maybe not even of interest to us. And what's interesting is like, nope, I only feel anxious every like 50 of these sessions or these, time periods rather than every 5 or something like that. Let's see. So first, do you have any questions about any of the obviously objective statements I've made so far?
Clearly objective. No, I think that like clicker or what have you is actually a really good measurement because it's real time, it's actionable, and if you're also able to level that up one step further and do it across the timeline of when they're clicking, if it's documented what was occurring during that time frame, that would give you even more feedback
Look at
of
Chad.
potentially
Yeah.
what I hate to use the word triggers, but like what's triggering or what may be causing during that
It's what
No,
the
moment.
that's
motivating
exact.
operations and
Yeah.
discriminative stimuli might be,
That's what
Chad.
I
Come on
said.
now.
But that's exactly what they talked about too. Is those moments become more salient when you're actually measuring it, and you can actually start to identify like, hey, what's going on around me when I'm feeling like garbage, and then like, what did I do uh, to intervene on that, and like, what was going on in the environment when I felt better, and yeah, that's exactly what they talked about.
Yeah, there's one more level that would make it even more objective, like even be a finer measure that we don't know if it's actually possible or not. But a few people in our field have suggested that being able to use brain imaging to see activity levels and the strength of those activity levels based on different situations. If you could measure that activity, that might actually give us the ability to measure a certain motivating operation versus another, or a certain the effects of a discriminative stimulus for one behavior versus one for another. And so it's possible that using that information you could figure out when you feel the most anxiety and actually measure the difference. But it's very subjective, short of being able to do that type of measure.
They've done it with mice, at least something similar
So
to that.
the hard part is there is with neuroplasticity, there's no one part of the brain that is directly accountable for any individual behavior. It's kind of like when you learn something, it is associated with all these different other things. Those neurological connections are being made. And so you're going to have all these different parts of the brain lighting up. There's not just one spot. And so you'd have to map out individually for that person where different responses have different activities, and almost very specific to the situation around you, to what the stimuli in the environment are, is a slight change in stimulus could potentially show you in a completely different pattern. But that doesn't mean the extent to which it lights up on the imaging would not maybe still be measurable at that point. So, uh, interesting, and to see if we can work with some neurologists and neuroscientists to actually get there at some point, because I do think our two sciences are on the same continuum, just
Yeah.
different, very different ends of it. And we have nothing in between like connecting us at this point.
What's the chip?
The Neuralink,
Neuralink. That'll do it, right?
that is just trying to sell me products. I absolutely know for a fact. It's
Yeah.
trying to get everybody to want to buy a Cybertruck since nobody's buying them. That's all that is.
Objective truth.
And I'll admit that w- it was before Musk was saying all the horrible things he said. And when they advertised 500 miles, it's supposed to be able to pull a train, it's going to handle all these situations. I'm like, I don't care if it's ugly or not. I want one. And then it came out and it was just nothing like that. And then he started saying horrible things. And I was so glad I did not get one.
Well, plus it's like 200 grand, isn't it? Isn't it ridiculous?
Not anymore. They can't sell them. But I
Oh,
think that the launch edition was like 120, but then it
okay.
went down. It was also supposed to be significantly cheaper too. That's
Did you
like
ever
a,
see the video of him testing it or showing it off at like a trade show, like the unveiling with the baseball?
I watched that when they first unveiled it live, yeah. And it
You
wasn't,
watched it live?
it was like a solid steel ball, not a
Oh,
baseball, but
oh,
yeah.
and it
Now he
just
had
like
just
shattered it.
they had just shot it. And so that could have weakened the glass, but
Okay.
yes, it did not go the way it was supposed to.
Okay. I guess the whole context is important to be objective here, but
And then the version they actually came out with, like the bumpers are just falling off because they're glued on. So like it's not even the same product that they showed it at that anyways. So
oh boy.
all right. So should we get into some examples of science that was believed based on the objective data that had been collected and then is now no longer believed?
Lay them on me.
All right. So I'm not going to get into what all these are. Some we'll talk about a little more than others, but I'm gonna say this wrong. Aristotelian physics was superseded by Newtonian physics. Would you say it? Is that Aristotle's physics? I'm guessing, but would that be
Era Eras
Aristotelian?
Eras
Aristotelian?
Aristotelian? I don't know.
Kind of sounds like an alien of some sort.
Aristotelian.
Yeah. There was also the static universe or stationary Einstein universe theory. That Einstein had showed a model that In 1917, he proposed that uh, basically the entire universe was just static. There's no
Oh,
movement. Everything was just out there in space. And Hubble, with Edwin Hubble, who's of the Hubble space station theory or Hubble telescope theory, fame, there um, was according to this obliterated, but he took that down quite quickly because he's the one who showed redshift, and we talked about that in the last episode while we were having
yeah.
fun outside a bar. Um, but the fact that things were moving away at such speed that they all appeared red shows that the universe has to be ever expanding at a exponential rate, basically.
And
What do you remember
I
what we said?
can't
It was
wrap my
like,
mind around that, but it's cool.
wasn't it 200 million miles an hour or something like that? That for redshift to occur, it has to be moving away from us at that
Uh,
speed.
yeah.
So, uh, that was a interesting way to tie it into what we talked about last week. That we couldn't think of redshift for like 10 minutes, but it was only a couple.
Right.
There was the Vulcan planet theory. You remember? Have you heard of that one?
No.
It was believed for a period of time that there was a small planet that existed between Mercury and the Sun. And it was proposed by a French mathematician, Urbain Jean Joseph Le Verrier. I see.
Nice.
I tried to get a little
Very
accent on that.
cultured.
Yeah. He named it Vulcan and was trying to explain why Mercury's orbit was so funky compared to other planets. And so they just assumed there must be this small planet in between there that's affecting the orbit. And it
Oh,
was shown to not exist. And then the orbit was later explained quite well by general relativity. So we'll let Einstein kind of take his place back in history after that first static universe idea. Energism or energeticism, I think that's what it is a theory that attempted to interpret all chemistry in terms of energy and rejected the concept of atoms.
yeah.
It didn't
Nice.
last. Um, Atoms themselves, like during the earliest atomic theories, were thought to be indestructible. And then later on, there was a plum pudding model where it was just kind of thought that the neurons, protons, electrons are all just jumbled up in this ball in there. And then the Rutherford model, which assumed that the nucleus was impenetrable, but the electrons were still free flowing around it, which obviously with what's happened in the last 70 years in bombing, we know that that's not true, and energy.
Right. Right.
Now quantum physics shows that those were all flawed, and it just has this nucleus that is there. It's tight, but it's not impenetrable with the electrons flowing freely around it. There was a theory for a long time that all humans originated from Asia. And now, although there's some theories that suggest it's different places, simultaneously or around the same time, that most theory now is that we have an African origin.
Hmm.
So, um, I didn't read
I
much.
didn't know the Asia theory.
I didn't either. I didn't look much into why they thought that. I'm guessing they're just talking earliest cave paintings or something like that, that there
Mm.
were signs of remains. Um, this one I found interesting, that caloric theory is the theory that a self-repelling fluid called caloric was a substance of heat and this is where the idea of calories come from. So energy basically was heat. All energy was heat. And then the work from Rumford and Joule later on gave us the joule, which is how now we measure energy instead.
Oh,
So that's where the idea of calories came from, which is interesting.
didn't know that.
No, I think I had another one about.
Isn't the calorie like the measurement of how much energy it takes to like break down or something?
Yeah, so to test the calories, what they would do was take the food or whatever item it is and burn it, and whatever how much energy it expelled from the burning of that would be how many calories it has.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And this is interesting because even with human energy, food intake, health in general, we still just often, at least in this country, look at the calorie. But a lot of it sounds like, anyways, reading this, a lot of other countries have kind of gone like, thrown it by the wayside because their idea is like, well, how much a food burns when you set it on fire? What's it have to do with weight gain or weight loss or the development of ATP and the and fuel for the individual cells? You know what I mean? And so
Mhm.
I knew that that was still a theory. It wasn't proven, and that there's still some evidence that reduction in calories can result in weight loss, and then some others that suggest it's more about moderate fat or carb intake and things like that. Supposedly, there's a study that, or a few studies that show that you cannot gain fat from eating protein alone. So it's just the other nutrients. But it really shows how much there is still maybe not known, or at least is questionable in some of these areas of theory as well. And I will just put out there that I did not talk to a kinesiologist or a nutritionist as part of this. This is just my own research on it. So uh, it very well could be that much of the world still believes in calories, and it's just a few places that did not, or maybe the one that wrote that paper I was looking at. So
I think calories are just an easy way to measure a general, but it's not the science behind
yeah,
how the body burns and works. And
yeah, I agree with you, but it is still really weird to me when you really get down and think about it, that they are assuming that our body is using a substance the same way that fire is. You
yeah,
know what I mean? That is the weird part to me, is we're just assuming, you know what? However much that burns, that's what it does to our body too. Because we're all made of fire. We're all fire people. And that's just how it works. So it's not to say it doesn't work. It's a very strange jump to make, it seems like.
I don't really burn many calories these days.
I burn a lot, just not in my body. I like to play with fire quite a bit. So
Just like light them on fire.
yeah,
yeah,
I
that would have been
remember
a
someone
great
said,
audio snippet for fire.
fire. Yeah, where's your
I
sound
don't
effects
have
there?
cool ones. I don't have cool ones. Here, we'll do a little.
This one's way too long. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
this one's 37 seconds
Yeah,
long.
let's not do
We'll
that.
stop. We'll
We're
stop.
not going to get a standing ovation for that one. Yeah, let's see. On the same lines with the health stuff, I like phrenology, the study of the shape of the skull and how that was supposed to affect someone's behavior if they were good or bad. Has obviously gone by the wayside, but was quite popular back, I think, around the 1800s or so. Um,
Mm.
this one I found interesting too. Homeopathy just seems like, I always interpreted the way people talk about it is healthcare that can be found around the home, like the methods that grandmothers may use, or different people may use to take care of their ill. But
Hmm.
according to this, the actual definition is, or the actual theory, original theory, is that disease can be cured by giving the person an infinitesimal dose of the substance that caused it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if like you had the plague, if we gave you a tiny bit of plague, that would fix the plague, supposedly. Like that was
That seems
according.
more akin to like vaccines than
Yes, but
or early vaccines.
this is after the fact. So that not preventing,
Oh,
we're talking about
yeah, yeah.
curing it. So at that point, we're just making you sicker, if anything. But it may have led to the idea of vaccinations, where giving you a bit of the virus or a dead virus that the body can then, you know,
That's
pick a.
interesting.
Yeah. So I'd never heard that, but this is supposedly the and I didn't write down the name, but the person that actually developed the field back in, I think it was like the 1600s. That was how they defined it, or what their theory was.
Whoa. So not essential oils, essentially.
Not in the way we think of it today.
Yeah.
And some of this is like interesting as well, because it led to good science, even though it wasn't. Like alchemy, where they're
Yeah.
back in the day, just trying to turn random items into gold all the
Yeah.
time. And that
Yeah.
led to the development of chemistry.
Mhm.
We should try that again.
You
Just
go
blowing
for it.
stuff up in a
Just
lab,
let
that'd
me
be
know
fun.
if you succeed. Um, astrology led to the development of astronomy, and so just because we don't believe that the movement, or at least scientifically, we don't believe that the movement of stars and celestial bodies affect us necessarily in any way other than, you know, if that tide came in a little faster than I meant it to and sucked me out to sea or something like that, it still led to studying astronomy and the stars, which is cool. And then, of course, there's everybody's favorite, the flat Earth, which uh, was believed by people during the medieval times, and then for some reason, people thought, you know what? Know who really knew what was going on is those people back in the medieval times. We should believe the crazy shit they thought of once
Yeah.
again.
Yep.
So again, we'll do a whole thing on conspiracy theories, but some of these are just silly. And the fact my some of them would be funny if they weren't sad or aggravating. Like my favorite one still is when I found out that people made the fake conspiracy theory that birds weren't real, that they were all just government robots. And I'm like, oh, I want a birds aren't
Was it
real
birds or
sticker.
bees? I thought
Birds.
it was birds. I thought I heard that with bees too, or maybe
They
I
they
missed.
probably have done that as well. But I'm like, you know what I want is like, I want one of those stickers, birds aren't real, just to like freak people out. Except then people started actually believing it as a true conspiracy. And now it's not funny anymore. Now it is
Yeah.
not us
Yeah.
making fun of you, but this is sad and I don't want to be part of this planet anymore. So
I don't want to be around anymore.
no. So what do you think? Do you think we explained enough of why you shouldn't just not believe in science at all when something you've been told to believe your whole life is found to be not true or not supported as well as we thought it was?
I think there's going to be people who are not fully convinced because they have so much faith in what they've already been told that it's going to be difficult to say, give science a chance. Let's open our
Yeah.
minds to the possibility that there's something beyond just my own belief. But
Yeah.
maybe.
The interesting thing is how much time we spent in school, not necessarily on the different facts, but on skepticism, how you need to question everything, even the experts around you. Don't just
Yeah.
take their word, but study it if you think that doesn't seem quite right, or take their word for now until somebody comes up with a better theory. And so I think that's more the take home is that nobody should be just blatantly believing anything as solid fact. This will never change anywhere because all that we have to interpret, the world around us are our senses, and we know those aren't perfect. You see things and then look back
Mine
again, and they're
are,
not.
but
I do. I hope you feel how, like you sense how I'm gonna lash out irrationally at you right now. Name the movie.
I don't know.
Come on, the Santa Claus.
Nope. I don't know if I've seen it. Sorry. Is that the Tim Allen one?
Yeah, and the little kid, like Tim Allen's getting frustrated, and his mom is married to a psychiatrist, and Tim Allen's getting frustrated. He's like, he's like, it makes you want to lash out irrationally. He's like, whoa, where'd you hear that?
I mean, that's you Detroiters and your Tim Allen is all I can say.
I saw him. Well, first of all, I don't agree with Tim Allen on most things in this planet, but I did see him at the
You don't have to
Starbucks.
agree with him to like the Santa Claus.
So first of all, grew up with Home Improvement, so yeah, like there's that. But no, I saw him at the local Starbucks the other day, and not the other day. I guess it's been like I don't know 8-9 months now. Um, and he was checking out on the phone, and I don't know, I couldn't tell. It sounded like maybe his agent or something talking about somebody, and the girl takes his order and then looks and she's like, "Name?" And he's like, "Tim." I was trying not to laugh in his face as I observed that because I don't think no matter how famous you are, you shouldn't walk around assuming everybody knows who
Yeah.
you
Well, the
are.
kids only
But
know him as Buzz Lightyear now, so
yeah, or Santa,
yeah,
maybe. If
yeah.
our kids like to watch the old Christmas movies, so
Santa, I know him.
yeah,
Name that movie.
Elf.
Yes, sir.
That is Elf.
I thought Kyle might know that one.
I
Oh,
did.
yeah,
I did know
Yeah.
that one.
but I
I know
jumped
most
in.
Christmas movies. I don't
Most
like the Santa Claus. I've seen it. I just didn't like it. So there.
all right, Grinch.
Yeah, no, I've seen that one and I liked it.
All right. Any other thoughts, questions? Have we convinced the world? Any of these things? I don't know.
We have.
Yeah.
I think we've done a good job.
earlier you talked about objective and subjective, and my brain kept going to like how frequently the word literally is misused. That's where my brain kept going with it. So I just had to drop that in there because it's got to be in the script
Yeah,
transcript.
we had a colleague, another BCBA that we work with, text us one night, and I have a feeling there might have been some substances involved or something. Probably out having fun with some friends. I don't know. It's like, is anything ever really truly subjective or objective? And so I had already had this conversations fairly recently about like it is a continuum until you do such a good job defining and measuring that everybody can agree on what it is you're defining and measuring. And so that really is what that comes down to. And that's what a lot of science is. If you're talking about two different things or the same thing, but calling it something differently, then there's going to be some subjectivity there. And science really relies on the defining of things. So,
Very good.
all right. Well, all right then. I guess we'll end it the way we always do. So, no matter how tired you are or how much tired you are now after listening to us drone on for about an hour, uh, try to look at the positive things in life. The world is crazy going on around us. Of course, they started war right after I finished telling everybody why war is illogical nowadays and unnecessary. So, there's that
Spite
to look
you.
forward to. But yeah, it was just to spite me, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But you have to find the things that make you happy. Look towards the positive. Count how often you're anxious, and then hopefully it'll start decreasing when you notice those stimuli in the environment affecting you, that sort of thing. And just try to be happy because you never know when someone's going to objectively measure the surface of Earth wrong, and it ends up it is flat, and you just take that next step on the sidewalk and fly right off the edge. So be careful out there and enjoy your day.
Be careful for that one.